Welcome to the Filipino American Women Project, a podcast show that shares stories and life lessons told by individuals living or have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female. I'm your host, Jen Amos, a fellow Filipino American woman, and I'm excited for you to join us. Let's get started. All right. Hi, everyone. Jen Amos here with the Filipino American Women Project podcast show. And as always, I have my incredible co-host with me, Nani Dominguez. Nani, welcome back to the show.
Hi.
Awesome. And as always, every time we get to do another show, it means we get to interview another incredible person in our community. So I would like to introduce you all to Sammay Dizon. Sammay is a healer, Artivist, and Truthspeaker. She's a femme, Filipinx, interdisciplinary artist, cultural producer, performance maker, and educator of Bicol, Kapampangan, and Ilocano descent, raised in Carson, California. And currently, she is in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. Sammay, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jen and Nani. Hello, everyone. Peace.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. As I do with most of my guests, I've been stalking you online, and I just think we're gonna have a fun conversation today. But cool. Why don't we start, Sammay, with you sharing, how did you hear about the Filipino American Women Project and what inspired you to join us today?
Sure. I heard about this project through my dear fellow healer, kapwa collector, sister girl, Janalyn Umipig, aka JL. And she just told me about what y'all were up to and said that it would be a great platform to share about my work and my story. And, you know, we're really in a time where Pinays and Filipinx folks are coming together and uplifting and elevating one another. So it just made perfect sense.
Awesome. And we love JL. She probably has the most downloads for her episode out of all of our stories on the podcast show. And I feel like every time we get feedback on the show, it's usually inspired from her episode. So JL, shout out to you. Yeah, she is awesome. And I'm just so glad that she recommended you as well, because I feel like the same energy coming from you that reminds me a lot of her. So
yeah. We're like holding it down on opposite coasts. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely. I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. So this show is dedicated to individuals who live or have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female or pronouns she, her. So Sammay, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your family background and why you identify as a Filipino American woman.
Definitely. Oh my goodness. So my parents migrated to the States in the 80s. My dad came first, mid 80s, and my mother came a couple years after. Both of them came to California. My mother is Yolanda Peñaflor Dizon, and she's from Ginobatan Albay in Bicol. And my father is Eduardo Agdepa Dizon, and he is Ilocano and Kapampangan from Gerona Tarlac in Central Luzon. I was born in California in Tongva territory. I grew up in Carson, California, a place where there are hella Filipinos. And so that was never a question for me. I've always known my heritage and my identity to that extent of just like really just seeing, you know, myself and everyday representations of myself and our people growing up. And I would say my family is, you know, we didn't bring the whole family to the States, so to speak. And I think everyone really does have their own unique trajectory of migration and journey. But for example, my mom is the oldest of 7, and she's the only one from her family in the States. My dad is the youngest of 6, and he's like one of 3 of the total siblings who came to the States. So for the most part growing up, even though I grew up around hella Filipinos, I didn't grow up around a lot of blood family. So my journey, I would say, in, you know, coming from a child to adolescence to adulthood has been really about bridging that gap culturally and through bloodline, and really finding that connection of being in the in-between and this liminal space of feeling like really that home is the Philippines, that motherland is the Philippines, and at the same time really honoring and being in reverence to the homes and the lands that have embraced me, that have, taken hold of me and maybe adopted me in some ways. So being LA, Tongva territory, and the Bay Area, Ramaytush Ohlone territory.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about why it's so important to you to talk about the original names of these cities. I mean, I feel like there's an obvious answer to it, but I love that you mentioned that. And I'd love to hear more about why it's so important for you to say that, to mention the original territories.
Most definitely. So I think, well, first of all, right, growing up in the States, in California, in Carson, that was not a thing. And even now, it's very much something that's growing, something that's more and more, I would say, becoming a part of the infrastructure, especially here in the Bay Area, where we are very much leaders in the work of decolonization and re-indigenization. And so as an artist, as a cultural producer, I really work within that space and that role and that responsibility as someone who is working to share and create from a place of honoring ancestry and reclaiming our pre-colonial traditions and knowledge bases. It's important not only for me to acknowledge and honor and recognize my Indigenous roots as a daughter of the diaspora, but also really, really be in relationship to the land that I'm a settler on, knowing that though the histories and the stories are distinct and unique from place to place, there is something we share around having been stripped away, having had our indigeneity and our pre-colonial ways stripped away from us. And so the work of decolonizing and re-indigenizing, being not only acknowledging places in their original names and giving honor to the first peoples that are very much existing and thriving in communities, but also making that bridge, making that connection, that to really honor our indigeneity is not just looking back at our own traditions and practices, but also being in relationship to wherever we are, even if we're visiting a place, even if we're in a place for like a layover, like knowing that land too has original peoples and an original name outside of our kind of like, our very like mainstream, invisibilized, like cultural amnesia facade, I would say.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just think that it's important what you just said about honoring our indigeneity is not only about knowing our own roots and our own ancestors' kind of history and heritage, but it's also about being in relationship with the land. Like, how much more connected could you get than where you're standing or sitting right now? And I think that that's a really good way to just, whatever's going on around you in that moment, to just really just center yourself and become fully present by starting off, remembering where that original territory was.
Just kind of what Nani said, it makes you more present, that you're literally in a territory where you're walking on history. It's not just what that land is today, but what it used to be. And I just think it's so fascinating that to think in that sense and to appreciate like, the place that you settled at, as you said. I'm curious because for me, I wouldn't know where to begin to learn, to do this kind of research, to learn about how to honor ancestry. I mean, I know I'm learning it through this podcast, through people that I interview, but for the territory itself, the place that you're currently settled at, I'm curious, how did you find that information? How did you do that research for yourself?
Oh, most definitely. Thank you for that question. I'm a young person, or I would rather say like I'm a 333-year-old grandmother in a young person's body, right? And so I really give big ups to my mentors and my teachers who really saw me, saw me early on before I could even see my own self and what I had the potential for, and really what my sacred path is in this life on this earth. So one of those magnificent beings, his name is Jack Gray, and he's a Maori contemporary artist and scholar based in New Zealand or Aotearoa. And in 2014, I was senior at Cal, UC Berkeley, in the dance and performance studies department. I was doing a project where he came as a guest artist, and the piece that we collaborated on was called Turanga Waiwai, and that's a Maori word for standing place. And, you know, at the time, I was really just 180 from where I am right now, and very much, you know, I think we as a society kind of like use the word lost and maybe like overuse that word. But if there was a time in my life where I was lost like that, that is definitely that time. And I was really, really blessed. I was really fortunate to just kind of be rerouted, you know, by spirit, by the ancestors that year, and to share space with Jack Gray. And in this work, it was about really understanding your place and how to stand strong and stand in your resiliency, knowing that you have indigeneity, knowing that you do have an ancestral land and ancestral home, but may not be on that land and may not be in that home or even have any knowledge of that home. So it was really about how do we stand in our standing place, you know, as settlers, as occupiers, as guests of other First Peoples lands. And so that was actually the first time I came to know who the Ohlone were. And I think in retrospect, it's kind of like, it blows me away to think about that was the first time I was like, oh, wow, there are First Peoples here, you know, and they're not extinct. They're not endangered, so to speak, right? Because we do, as an American society, really, we do a terrible job of honoring and recognizing and just shining light on those really hard and traumatic histories that are a part of our country's narrative. And so I would say, like, as a young person, right, I remember being maybe in 3rd or 4th grade and learning about the Trail of Tears. And I actually remember like being in my classroom, like I remember my eyes like welling up, you know, like as a child, and not really like, I couldn't really understand. I couldn't understand how that could have happened. I didn't understand how our nation could have let that happen, right? Because you're this young person in a migrant family, and you're on this like American dream path really early on. And then you're just sitting there like, but wait, that's hella fucked up. And why does it only get this small paragraph in my like 500 page history book, right? So I remember that memory as a child. And then fast forward to 2014, when I really had my first exchanges with First Peoples of a land that I, you know, was calling home. It was really like a veil was taken off, you know. It was like the glass shattered and I could just see things more clearly, or see things for what they were. And so that process really helped me to understand the importance of being in relationship with First Peoples and the histories of the land, in conjunction with my own personal research and history of my family and our ancestral lineages.
Oh, that's awesome. So note to self, I need mentors and teachers.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the trippy part, I think, because, you know, like prior to that experience, I had spirit not rerouted me there, I would have still probably not really known, you know, any of that. And I think it's very common for us to just not know because it's not embedded in our mainstream culture. But I think now in 2019, we do have so much more resources available, whether online or through social media. There's just more visibility of Indigenous peoples and Indigenous media, and also spaces, just community spaces where there is more intercultural exchange and an encouragement of folks to just learn, to just sit and be together and learn and be uncomfortable and be in this discomfort of getting the glass shattered.
Mm-hmm. All right, Jen Amos here, jumping into the middle of our show, as I always do, to remind you why this show is possible. So, at the end of every episode, I tend to say, if you didn't catch our guest contact info, don't worry, we'll have those in the show notes. Check them out. I worked so hard on them. You're welcome. Well, it's been brought to my attention that our show notes are not as easy to find as I thought, which is why starting summer 2020, the Filipino American Women Project is proud to be partnering with Captivate, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. Captivate is created for independent podcasters, designed from day one to help you to focus on audience growth and the expansion of your audio influence. One way that Captivate makes our lives easier as independent podcasters is by taking the guesswork out of making a website for your show. That's right, a website for your show. So listeners, starting summer 2020, finding our show notes will be so much easier, all thanks to Captivate. You're welcome, as always. If you're about to start podcasting or are getting burnt out from all the extra work of producing one, like building a website, consider a 7-day free trial, that's right, free, with Captivate by visiting thephilamwoman.com. That's the Philam, short for Filipino American Woman.com. Or, check out our show notes in the meantime, which is in the details section of each episode. Once again, you can visit thephilamwoman.com or visit the details section of this episode. Yeah, I personally feel like, and maybe it's just because of doing this podcast show, but I just feel like we're in this generation now where it's all about storytelling and it's all about representation. And it's such a beautiful thing because it's so validating. I feel like for a lot of my life, I didn't feel grounded as a Filipina, and just being able to have these interactions, these types of interviews is making me feel more grounded and appreciative and just proud to show up as I am. So it's all beautiful. So I appreciate you sharing all that.
Yes, girl, show up as you are. Yes.
Yeah, seconding everything that you just said, Jen, about how we're in the kind of era where storytelling is becoming popular, at least within our community here, and that it is obviously something that's incredibly beneficial for not only us, but the generations that are going to come after us. And with that said, there's only a handful of people, really, it seems, that have this kind of knowledge about, original territory and indigenous land and things like that. And so you being one of those people, no pressure, but we're here, we're all here to learn a lot from people like you and JL. And so I think it's just important to, again, keep you talking. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to bring you and JL on the show, maybe on a quarterly basis.
Oh my gosh.
That would be great. That would be so good for us because we're so busy and it's hard to catch each other.
Yeah.
But a scheduled time.
And the time difference.
Great.
Yeah, we should do that.
Time difference.
Yeah, no, definitely. Okay, noted for the future. Beautiful. Well, Sammay, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your background and just the importance of honoring our ancestors, not just back home, but where we currently live, like the land that we are settled in currently. So thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead and fast forward to today. As I mentioned, I have been stalking you online, but for people that don't know you and have not stalked you online yet and will after this interview, why don't you give people a snapshot of your life today, particularly what keeps you busy and most excited about life nowadays?
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Wow. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that question. What makes me excited for life nowadays? That's such a great question to ask, I feel like, in December of like the last month of the year, because it is this deep reflection, right, of all that's happened this past year and kind of laying some intentions and groundwork for next year for this big like 2020 vision. But really what excites me and what has been really bringing me a lot of joy in this artist life is really has really been the spaces where I feel I can be my most authentic self, the spaces where I really don't have to explain myself and what my path is, where people are really just fully in tune and on board and can see me and can receive me and see each other and receive each other in a really holistic way. So I'm a company member of Embodiment Project, which is a hip hop political theater company here in the Bay Area. And we have this work called X-Rated Planet that we just previewed this past weekend in Oakland, in Hui Chin. And it traversed sexual trauma and intergenerational trauma and just all of these things that we have a really hard time talking about in everyday conversation. So there were some really courageous, or we say vulnerageous, storytelling happening through dance, spoken word, live song, to really promote and model what healing and restorative justice can look like through performance ritual. So that's a big thing that gives me joy, just getting to be in that process with fellow kin. We're like this intercultural tribe of like ancient beings in young people's agile bodies who are really telling stories that bridge past, present, future in order to really recreate destiny, as our dear friend Sarah, who is the director of Destiny Art Center, this incredible youth organization in Oakland, had said after our show was that we were literally recreating destiny. And I think, as someone who just really remembers the dialogue around manifest destiny as a young girl, like to recreate destiny is really a place that I'm like sitting in and dancing within nowadays. And then also I facilitate these embodied storytelling workshops here in the Bay Area called Duluyan being a Filipino word for vessel. And I really have no words. Since 2014, I really have been trying to understand my role as an artist in the larger work of decolonizing and re-indigenizing, and now really having a good hold on my own professional artist life as a dancer, as a performance artist, and just being really in the multidisciplinary realm of the work. I truly feel Duluyan is a place where I can be fully in my practice of what I'm supposed to be doing on this earth, or what I am already doing and am meant to be doing, which is really assisting our kapwa, our kin in returning to our bodies, in returning to our embodied histories through movement, through music, through prayer, through circle. And so that in a lot of ways is my way of bringing the work outward, because I do feel like as a professional artist, I mean, you just don't meet artists of color every day who are doing the work that myself and my kin are doing, and it's just like the reality. And so to create space for folks in the community who have full-time jobs, who might not get to take a dance class or might not feel comfortable in like traditional, like more Western based therapy and healing spaces, Duluyan is really a place where we get to be in our bodies and be in our bodies in a really unapologetic way, in a holistic way, in a social and emotional responsive way, in a healing trauma centered way. So that is, that's like, I feel like that space is beyond joy giving to me. I think it's really life purpose giving to me. And I get the beautiful opportunity to also teach throughout the city at schools as a teaching artist. So being with the young ancestors like undoubtedly gives me joy in all these other ways of just getting to like be my inner child and do that healing work. And just one more that I'll add would be, I've been really working on my music this past year, and that has really been a dream since I was a little girl, to like really perform like singing and dancing. You know, I used to want to be a pop star, but now of course it's taken a different trajectory. That is exciting to me because as an artist who's usually in the live performance realm and theater realm, I just don't get as much opportunity to disseminate the work in a more widely received platform. So with the music, I'm really seeking to use that to just reach more audiences. And I actually have a new music video coming out this month, I believe on the 22nd, and it's called Blood. And it's really about reclaiming our ancestral magic. And I think, I'm excited. I think you're going to love the video. It's really like it's just uplifting, like all of these things, stories, taboos that we've been working hard to reclaim, I would say, especially in this generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And just hearing you talk this entire time, you just sound so centered, and you sound like you are, it sounds like you're in your element, you know, like you're just doing a lot of things that well, it sounds like you're doing a lot of things, you know, emphasis on a lot, you know, but that fulfill you and that satisfy you. And, you know, I myself too, I consider myself a very eclectic person. I don't just do one podcast show. I have like 4 podcast shows, and I have like other projects. And, you know, I feel like I'm an artist in my own way in the work that I do. But all of it collectively makes me feel like I'm in my element, you know? And so I feel that from you when you're talking, just, you know, how passionate you are. And I like how you said that you're around people or you're doing things where you don't feel like you have to explain yourself. And to me, that just tells me that you've kind of found your tribe. You know, you found like just the right group of people or types of people to be around, to be your best self. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I just think it's so cool.
It just sounds like you find the most joy when you're in community with folks that, like you said, you can process in connecting with their heritage and teaching them, you know, this knowledge that's really just not readily available to us. Yeah. And so that's all I was going to add, was just that it sounds like maybe that's you found your purpose in all of this exploring that you've done with the different organizations you've worked with your music endeavors and everything. And it is beautiful to kind of witness you really coming into, I don't know if you would refer to it as your purpose, but that's what it sounds like from our end.
Yeah, definitely. A dear friend coined it to me as my higher proposal, and I've been using that. Yeah, doesn't it kind of like give you like, how you
I
like that.
I'm gonna have to use that.
That's beautiful. Well, keep up the good work, Sammay, and just it's amazing. And I always admire our fellow Pinais, especially the ones that are really good at articulating where they are in life and what they're doing and their purpose. So I've loved listening to everything you've been saying so far.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to be received by you both, and you know, it feels really easy. Yeah. It's so nice to know that we have not met in person in this physical life, but that there is that like immediate sense of kapwa. I think that's so beautiful and so special to who we are as Pinais.
Yeah, and and I third that. I also want to add, I'm glad that you said that although we haven't met, you know, in person yet or physically, that there's this connection. And I feel like that's what I love about doing this podcast show is, for some reason, when people join us on our show, because we don't see each other, I think we listen to each other that much more. And I think it just promotes a more engaged conversation. So I love it, and I love it all. And I appreciate you all doing this with me on this show, because I always like joke to Nani and everyone that we're just making up this project as we go. And it's just been so fruitful. Just being open to it, like just being open to like what stories will come in and who wants to get involved. So yeah, it's just really awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Yay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into really the purpose of the show, which is sharing a life lesson and a story. And I love this part because to me, I feel like this is why the show exists is, one, to understand that there are people that look like us or come from the same motherland as us that, although it seems like we have so many similarities, there's also so many differences that we have. And I think just learning from our stories really expands our worldview of each other and our place in this world. And also what keeps me going and doing this show is just hearing these life lessons. And because it can apply, like when I edit these shows, I just think, oh man, that's a good lesson that I could apply for today. So, Sammay, for your life lesson and story today, you wanted to share that when you are not aligned with your higher purpose, the universe is going to let you know. So I'd love for you to, yes. So I would love for you to elaborate on that and share maybe an aspect or a story in your life that led you to that life lesson. Hey everyone, Jen Amos here, taking a quick break in between our interviews as I always do, to actually talk about a new resource that I have personally been using for a couple of weeks now called 7 Cups. I want to give a shout out to Asia Hilario, who shared this resource in episode 29. So check it out. We live in a world where you can be surrounded by people, but still feel lonely, with nobody to turn to when things get rough. But being heard is an important part of being human. Psychologist Glenn Mariotti, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, saw that there was great power in listening, but he knew not everyone had someone to talk to. He started to wonder, how can I make being heard a reality for everyone? And that's why 7 Cups was born. Thanks to thousands of volunteer listeners, including myself, stepping up to lend a friendly ear, 7 Cups is happy to say, we're here for you. No matter who you are or what you're going through, this is a place where you'll be heard and cared for. We might be strangers on the surface, but underneath, we're just the friends you haven't met yet. 7 Cups has trained volunteer listeners available 24/7 to give emotional support over online chat. It's anonymous and, get this, completely free. When you need someone to talk to, we're here to listen and help you feel better. Learn more about 7 Cups today by visiting 7cups.com, or, as always, you can check out the show notes for the link.
Most definitely. So earlier in this interview, I shared about a time in my life in 2014 where I was a senior at Cal, and in this process with my mentor, Jack Gray, around indigeneity and just that could not have come at a more perfect time, because I was in what I like to call a toxic non-relationship. And in conjunction with that, really, I think coming into my consciousness about the entire world and my place in the world. And when you start to have that opening and cracking of the shell, things and people start to in some ways like morph, I would say, in your eyes, and you just start to see truth, just like plain hard truth. No veils, no illusions. And so I was just in a place where I was not well. And in retrospect, I can pinpoint the ways I was doing harm on myself and really not cultivating or practicing a sense of self-love and self-care that I am very adamant and really, really centered in now in my life. And at that time, I had a concussion.
Oh, wow.
That forced me to miss a lot of class and miss a lot of rehearsals, and the doctor ordered me to sit in the dark and meditate. And I laugh at it because when you're 20, was I 20? I might have been 20 or 21. When you're that age, I don't know. I think everyone has a unique journey, but for me at the time, that was not an option, sitting in the dark. I was like, what are you talking about?
You're like, I have stuff to do.
I have things to do. I'm in like 10 million productions. I'm the director of my dance team. Like, there was no way I was going to follow orders, right? And, granted, it was a mild concussion. And so I just kind of had to find a balance in that, which was about missing class and being more by myself. But I was also at the same time, again, in this toxic non-relationship. And so there was a lot of ways I was just not caring for myself or putting myself first. And then lo and behold, it came around the time where we were preparing for this performance for a competition that our team hosts every year in the Bay Area. And I still performed because I was like, I'm a senior and there's no way this FOMO, the FOMO thing, I've gotten over that. But at the time it was really real. And so I really believed I was invincible, in a way that was harmful to my well-being. And I think that's I think overall something that is about being a youth, being like invincible and just like thinking you can defy odds. And so I performed and I did a great job. I remember like performing and being like, I just performed and I had a concussion, bam, but you would have never known. Mm-hmm. And then I remember I was making a speech, and our tradition was always to like secretly, like pop these champagne bottles and then like shower the other directors who had planned that competition. And of course, it happens that way in which like my team captain, who's probably in his second year at that time, like came up running with everybody else behind all of us and jumped up, and his elbow with the champagne bottle in hand, like his elbow hit the exact spot where my concussion was originally. And I remember that moment so viscerally because it was really, it's like time slowed down in this really movie-like way in which we were, it was such this like celebration moment and cheering and jumping up and while everyone was going up, like I literally and physically went down, because I had this like really sharp, pointed pain that I just like, no one saw except me happen. And I remember like going down and just being like, worst pain ever. And then like in a snap, nothingness. And I remember like seeing everything happening, but not being able to like mentally process what I was feeling and really trying to do that thing of like pretending I'm okay and being okay so that like I don't, burden the situation or interrupt the celebration, to the point that I like ran to this like dark corner where no one could see me. And I just started crying and like hyperventilating. Like my mind did this like haywire thing. And I wasn't like, I couldn't actually feel pain, but I couldn't stop crying. And I was just really fortunate and blessed in that moment that like my co-director, like my best friend, was there for me and like really helped me through that. But that was like, a big moment of, looking back, I'm like, wow, I thought I could perform on a concussion and be okay. And, universe was like, you're going to do that. And then you're going to suffer the repercussions. And so, and that's like not the end of it, right? Because I didn't learn the lesson yet. And so months later, I know it's a lot. Months later, I actually went to Brazil. And that's a really important part of my story because that's really where I found my like spiritual revolution, revitalization. And Brazil continues to be that place for me. But coming back, I went back to school. I was finishing up my spring semester. I fell back into the toxicity and I had an eye injury.
Oh man.
And I'm laughing now because I'm just like, wow, so many signs that I really chose not to listen to. And, I'll keep that one shorter, but essentially there's actually a video of me telling this specific story on the Entrepreneurs website. I did a lightning talk. And so if you want to like see me story tell with gesture and facials, that's really the video to watch. But essentially, I had recurrent cornea erosion, which essentially meant I had I'm a contact lens wearer. And every time you take your contact lenses off, daily, the most top layer of your eyeball comes off, which is actually not a big deal. It's like a really natural regenerative process. But for some reason, I had an abnormal cell growing, and that's why there was like pain in my eye. And girl, I had pain in my eye, and I just thought it was normal. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh man, yeah.
I should have gotten it checked a long time ago, but for some reason, I was just like, okay, that's just my right eyeball is gonna hurt every time I take off my glasses.
Yeah, as long as it's not
oh my goodness,
doing what you need to do, right? Yeah,
like it's not bleeding. It's like it must be fine.
Yeah.
So essentially, I had that, and then that was another moment of like needing to miss classes and rehearsals, and that was when I was in the process with Jack Gray, and I remember coming back to rehearsals, and me feeling like really depressed and really incompetent and inadequate and not being able to fulfill my roles and responsibilities that I had planned to do and carry out that year. And I remember him sitting me down and him saying, it was he said so much more, and I wish I could say it verbatim, but the core essence of what he was telling me was that the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual were all interconnected. And at that time, that was my first introductory to what that was and could feel like. And at that moment, I was like, oh, it was like in that moment that I realized this like continued, minor, but still significant, these like physical inconveniences and pain, me normalizing this pain and just trying to move through life with it. It hit me in that moment that it was a much larger thing, that actually I had to look at my life in all of its minute and minuscule and nuanced capacities and really understand what was off and what was imbalanced and what was I sacrificing in order to keep up with this like facade, this outer image, right? This feeding of ego, of something, of someone that I was trying to be, but really was not inherent to my inherent path and sacred proposal. So it was a big life changer, and after I graduated, I took some serious time off from life, and I kind of like came into my shell and actually did the sitting and meditating and being in the dark and understanding that, I had to heal. There was so much that I had to heal before I could like rebuild and return to a life that would be more meaningful, that would be rooted in my purpose, and that was no longer a life about being someone I wasn't, And thus, my life lesson, and we talk about this a lot actually in Delusion, folks come with physical ailments and talk about their chronic pain. And, I'm not at all a medical doctor, but we do a really good job, I think, in community and in relationship and just being rooted in our ancestral wisdom and gifts to know that it is all interconnected and that our pain really does come from things that are seated much deeper than a one-off injury or like that. There's always a deeper reason, and there's always something actually that we need to look at beyond the ankle sprain or beyond the tight neck, that there's actually, an ancestor knocking or a story that really needs to be revealed and be processed and be processed with others for that healing.
Oh man, absolutely. I feel like the way I can relate to that is with I have eczema. And I remember there was a time where my skin was just breaking out so badly. It usually goes over at one point, my whole right hand was covered in eczema, and I'm right hand dominant. And just like what you said, I normalized the pain. I was like, it's fine. Like, it's okay if I can't shake hands with anyone anymore. Like, no big deal. And long story short, I had a lot of revelations similar to you where it's like, wow, like by the time it shows on your body, like that's actually a clear sign, that something inside of you is trying to scream at you, and say, hey, like this is not good for you, in your body and your mind, your soul. I just want to thank you so much for your time today, for sharing a little bit about your family background and who you are and what you represent, and how, in our perspective, it seems like you're in alignment with a lot of things, thanks to the universe letting you know.
Yes, thank you.
and we're just so grateful to have you today. For people that feel moved by everything you said today on our show, how could they get a hold of you? How could they find you online?
Oh, definitely. Please visit my website, sammaydizon.com. Follow me on Instagram at SammayBaby, SammayBaby. Drop me a message. Come through to Deluyan if you're in the Bay Area. And let's get connected and let's cultivate.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both, Jen and Nani.
Awesome. All right. Well, listeners, if you did not get that contact information, don't worry. I'm always super generous about the show notes. So check that out. I work really hard on those show notes. Check them out just to humor me. Really appreciate it. Sammay and Nani, I want to thank you both for a wonderful conversation today, and also to our listeners for listening in as always. Thanks so much. And we look forward to speaking with you in the next episode. Tune in next time.
Yeah. Blessings, fam.